But you are finding an alibi, another alibi. You try to find alibi, an excuse for the players. Okay, continue to do this, to find excuse for the players. You do only this. You do only this. Excuse for the players. Yeah, but the players maybe my future, and then okay, they lost confidence, they lost spirit, they lost to be a team. Excuse. Try to protect every time, and this situation. Come on. We are professional. We paid. The club paid us a lot of money. The players receive money. Me receive money. You understand? Not to find excuse and don't have spirit.
So Antonio Conte, well, that was one hell of a rant. That was one hell of a way to throw your players under the bus following that 3-3 draw with Southampton away from home. But do you know what the thing is? In the media, on social media, on YouTube, across all platforms, people, fans, the likes of TalkSport, True Geordie, many others have been so critical of Antonio Conte. Everyone is coming for Antonio Conte. They're criticising him. They're saying he shouldn't have said what he said about the players. They said he's not taking personal responsibility, and they said that he's clearly engineering a way for himself to get sacked and leave the football club and not be there next season. Now, I think, to be honest with you, I think a lot of people are missing the point. I think, first of all, Antonio Conte is leaving Tottenham at the end of the season. I think regardless anyways. His contract's up at the end of the year. I don't think he would have been staying anyway, regardless, because I don't think many of the Spurs fans have been happy with him, and I think he said stuff in the past, and I think some of, personal circumstances that have happened with him this year, including getting sick and obviously losing a close friend as well, have meant that I think he was going to go back to Italy, regardless. So I think this whole thing of him engineering to be sacked, I think is untrue, because even if he gets sacked now, there's no payout there. Very little payout anyways, with the fact that he's only, 6 or 8 weeks left in his contract anyways. But obviously Antonio Conte came out, went a bit mental, went a bit crazy after that draw versus Southampton. And as I was saying, a lot of people very unhappy with Antonio Conte for throwing the players under the bus. And it's something that probably doesn't happen too much anymore in management. I mean, we used to see in the past, in years gone by, Jose Mourinho was famous for doing it. Alex Ferguson has done it in the past as manager of Man United. Klopp has often questioned his own Liverpool players, and we've seen it with managers time and time again. And to be fair, it rarely ever works because of the player power that is there today. Usually the players are the ones who have the final say, and usually are the ones who dictate the management and dictate what's going to happen with the manager. But in this scenario, in my opinion, I think Antonio Conte is 100% spot on to criticise the Tottenham players, because actually if you listen to what he said, and I think some of what he said has been lost in translation, he said in that interview, in that press conference after the game, he even said that Tottenham, he's had enough. He said before that he's waited so long to say this, that now is the time where he's finally going to come out and say this. And he said before he's tried to protect the players, he's tried to not come out and go mad. He's tried to not criticise them in interviews, but after that game, that was the final straw, and that was the moment where he's gone and looked at it and thought, I've had enough. You know what I mean? It's not like Antonio Conte has criticised the players straight off the bat from day one. It's not like Antonio Conte has been extremely angry with the players right from the get-go. This has been a consistent team, not just under Antonio Conte, not just this season under Antonio Conte. It happened last season at times, but it's happened under previous managers time and time again. Jose Mourinho, Mauricio Pochettino, Nuno De Santo, even going as far back as the likes of Harry Redknapp, where scenarios like this have happened. It is, as Giorgio Chiellini said, it is the history of the Tottenham. Antonio Conte, for me, is not just criticising what has happened in that 90 minutes in that game. He is criticising what's happened with Tottenham over the last 4 to 5 years. And in my opinion, he is 110% spot on to do so, because Antonio Conte, it's not like he's a nobody. It's not like he's a manager who hasn't achieved things. It's not like he's a manager, claiming to be bigger than he is and he's thrown his toys out of the pram when he's no credibility in the bank. This is a man who won multiple league titles in a row with Juventus, and people forget when he took over Juventus, they were in ruin. They'd finished 7th the season previous. Juventus were an absolute mess. I mean, they were trying to rebuild themselves after the whole match fixing scandal, and Italian football was in a very dark place. Antonio Conte came into Juventus and made them great again. Won multiple titles, started an era of domination. Fair enough, things didn't work out in Europe, but generally speaking, Antonio Conte's time at Juventus was a huge success. He made great signings. He brought in the likes of Paul Pogba, for example, who hadn't broke through at Man United at that point. He made smart signings, he made big signings, and he turned Juventus into a force. When he went to Chelsea, people say that he inherited a side that were winners. And to a certain degree, it is true. Chelsea had won the league 2 seasons previous. They had a very, very good squad. But let's not forget, they finished 10th the season previous. And that season, where Chelsea won the league under Antonio Conte, was one of their best seasons in the history of Chelsea Football Club, and one of the best title-winning seasons in the history of Chelsea Football Club. They were relentless. I mean, I remember they went 15, 20 games unbeaten. They went on incredible winning streaks. They won away at places like Manchester City, for example, and they won the league in phenomenal style. And if you ask most Chelsea fans, they will tell you that actually that was one of the most entertaining and brilliant seasons being a Chelsea fan, because they won the league in style. They won it playing brilliant football, which people forget sometimes with Antonio Conte, that season they played great football on the counter-attack, quick, fast, pacey. Players like Eden Hazard, Diego Costa, they were relentless, and Chelsea were just phenomenal that season. Fair enough, things went wrong in his second season at Chelsea, but if you look at the history of Chelsea, that's very much happened with almost every manager that they had under Roman Abramovich, where things would go brilliant, and then very quickly things would go bad over a course of 2-3 years. Carlo Ancelotti, Jose Mourinho, even Thomas Tuchel, albeit he got sacked under another regime. I think he would have been sacked under Roman Abramovich eventually anyways, given how things had been going. So, there's a history there with Chelsea that's happened with their managers. He takes over an Inter Milan side who hadn't won Serie A in 10 years, hadn't been relevant in Serie A, a team that was struggling to even get into the Champions League places in Serie A. A team that, were nowhere near the history of Inter Milan from 10, 15 years previous. And his first task was to break the mould of a Juventus team that he built. Now, I know AC Milan have won a league title since that period of Juventus domination as well. But he was the one who did it. He was the one who won a league title with Inter Milan, brought them back to their best, and getting them into the Champions League, getting them to win that Serie A, a phenomenal achievement. And clearly, when you look through the basis of his management, winning league titles with Juventus, won a league title with Chelsea, after they'd finished 10th the season previous. As I said, finished with 93 points, a phenomenal season from a Chelsea perspective. And then he goes to Inter Milan and he wins the Serie A. So clearly, this guy has got credibility in the bank, and this guy is a born winner. And then you look at it from a Tottenham perspective in their last 10 years, since their last trophy in 2008, which was the League Cup or whatever it was called back then. Tottenham in the last 10 years have had brilliant managers, brilliant players, brilliant facilities, a brilliant stadium, and what have they won? Nothing. Managers like Jose Mourinho, Mauricio Pochettino, even going as far back as Harry Redknapp, who done a very good job with Tottenham at that moment in time, and Andre Villas-Boas, who's his success can be questionable at times. He hasn't really done that much as a manager, but generally speaking, with Pochettino, Jose Mourinho, and now Antonio Conte, you've got managers there who have a proven track record of trophies. Pochettino, you can argue he won his trophies with PSG after Tottenham, so maybe that's a little bit different, and it's probably harder not to win trophies with PSG than it is to win them, to be fair. And Pochettino actually, probably didn't actually do that well with PSG, but who has, to be fair? But Jose Mourinho and Antonio Conte have won trophies. Even Jose Mourinho, since leaving Tottenham, has won trophies. I'm pretty sure Jose Mourinho has won trophies with every single team he has managed since, taking over with Porto. Maybe before Porto, he didn't win trophies, but he's won trophies with every club, since those days, other than Tottenham. And for me, there has to be, there's a common denominator here. It can't just always be the managers. It has to be the players. And I think Antonio Conte is right to criticise the players, because again and again, I think what's happening is a lot of those players, they're soft and they're not buying into Conte's tactics, just like they didn't with Jose Mourinho, and they're looking for an easy way out, and they're looking for an escape, and they're not listening to their managers. They're not listening to instructions. I think the board, Daniel Levy, I think they're culpable as well. You know, fair enough, in the transfer window last season, they spent big, they brought in players, and, you know, Conte probably got his wish and probably did bring in big players and players that he wanted. But I think you go back further years, the investment wasn't there, the right players weren't brought in. The strategy and the long-term thinking of Tottenham on the pitch in terms of what type of club do they want to be has not always been there. What type of style do they want to play? You know, they go from Jose Mourinho, a sort of pragmatic, more defensive coach, an old school type of coach at this stage, and then they go to a more modern coach, Nuno Santo, who's more forward thinking, expansive football, and then they switch it back again to Antonio Conte, who again is a bit more of a pragmatic coach, but again is a proven and born winner. And as I said, I think Antonio Conte, I think his frustration has been over the course of the season, because I think the tactics have not clearly been implemented from the players. And look, Conte does deserve a portion of the blame. At the end of the day, he is the manager. You know, he should take more responsibility than he probably should, you know, than he has. And I don't think it's, you know, the complete fault of the players. I think there are good managers out there. You're seeing Erik ten Hag turn things around, you know, change the culture a little bit at Man United. Klopp done the same with Liverpool. Arteta's doing the same right now with Arsenal. It can happen and it can be done. But I think with Conte, I think because he's been so successful and because his tactics have been met, players have listened to him in the past, I think he's looked at this and thought, you guys are not listening to me, so at this point, you know, I don't care anymore. You know, and he knows he's one of the best managers to come out of Serie A, you know, in the last 20 years. He's going to get a top job in that league. You know, the next big job that comes available, Juventus, Inter, AC Milan, whatever big job it is, he's the man who's getting that job, and probably even the Italian job as well. So he knows at the same time that he's nothing to lose here. He's leaving at the end of the season anyway. So I think he's right to criticise the players. He's right to say, you know, you guys haven't listened to what I'm saying, and time again, that this has happened with Tottenham. This has happened under Jose Mourinho. This has happened under Pochettino. This has happened under Nuno Santo, and now it's happened under Antonio Conte. And that's why I believe that Antonio Conte is perfectly right to criticise the players. I think because Tottenham fans have been burned under Jose Mourinho a little bit with the sort of negative tactics, and they've had such a great team for such a long time and not won anything, it's meant that the patience with Conte is not the same as what it would have been under Pochettino, for example, because Pochettino was sort of taking the Tottenham side out of a different era in some ways, and I think Conte probably has to do the same, and maybe, you know, the loyalties are stuck with certain players. But all in all, that's my opinion on Antonio Conte. Like and subscribe. See you all later.